afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 7th Standing Committee on the Status of Women. It's wonderful to have us all here. Some of us are on Zoom today, and some of us are here in the room. I'm just going to remind everybody that pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Tuesday, February 4th, the committee will resume its study on intimate partner and domestic violence in Canada. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from public health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, the following is recommended for all of those attending the meeting in person. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Everyone must maintain 2 meters of physical distancing, whether seated or standing. Everyone must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room. It is recommended in the strongest possible terms that members wear their masks at all times, including when seated. Non-medical masks, which provide better clarity over cloth masks, are available in the room. Everyone present must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizers at the room entrance. Committee rooms are cleaned before and after each meeting. To maintain that, everyone is encouraged to clean surfaces such as desk, chair, and microphone with the provided disinfectant wipes. For those participating virtually, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. You may speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of the screen for either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your mic will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. I'm just going to check, and that's all working today. Perfect. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Before we welcome our witnesses, I would like to provide this trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to violence and assault. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or if you need help, please advise the clerk. I'm also going to let everybody know today I've made this really beautiful sign. It's your 1-minute sign. So if you're giving to any of our panelists, when you're giving your 5 minutes, you'll be getting this at your 4-minute for your 1-minute warning. And to any of our questionnaires and our MPs, that's a reminder for you as well. So let's begin today's meeting. I would like to welcome to our first panel the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres. And we have Gertie May Muse, who is the Chief Executive Officer, and Sean Longboat, the Director of Programs, and from the Inuit Women of Canada, and I never say that properly, so make sure I get that on my tongue. I'd like to welcome Jerry Sharp, who is the interim president. So for opening comments, we will all begin off with 5 minutes. I would like to turn the floor over to the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres for your 5 minutes. You have the floor. Are you able to hear us?
Can you hear me?
Hear you just fine, so you have 5 minutes to start.
Oh, okay.
Go for it.
Thank you. My name is Gertie May Muse, and I'm Mi'kmaq from St. George's, Newfoundland, and currently the Chief Executive Officer for the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres. I am joined today by my respected colleague, Sean Longboat, a Cayuga man from Hamilton, who is currently the Director of Programs at the O5C. Sean is a kind man, meaning he is committed advocate for the protection of Indigenous women, children, and families. I've asked him to join me today to discuss Friendship Center-wise practices to ending violence. We are very honored to join the committee this afternoon, and I thank you for the invitation. Our presentation will provide some highlights from our more substantive brief that had been submitted to the committee. Our organization supports 29 member friendship centers across Ontario for the past 5 decades, and also additional delivery sites, and have ensured culture and community are at the core of all of our programs and services. Ending violence has always been a pillar of our work, recognizing the disproportionate rate of violence against Indigenous women, girls, and the two-spirit LGBTQIA community members. We also never forget the impact of violence and trauma on Indigenous men and boys in our communities. Our efforts have contributed to frameworks and initiatives that have influenced the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and in particular, the Urban Indigenous National Action Plan. going forward from the foundation of evidence provided through the National Inquiry and many prior reports and research. I would like to share information on two key areas to inform the committee's study. The first are about 3 Indigenous-led initiatives delivered by Ontario Friendship Centres that have been designed to address intimate, partner, and domestic violence. And I would also like to recommend new approaches that can be adopted by the federal government to effect meaningful change and impact within our current generation. So to begin, I will share information about 3 key initiatives. The first is the Indigenous Healing and Wellness Strategy, which was launched provincially in 1994 to address the increase in intimate partner violence and domestic violence in Indigenous communities. The Indigenous Healing and Wellness Strategy supports Indigenous governed programs and services to reinstate the healing journey in a holistic manner that is aimed at better outcomes at the community level. Since 2019, Friendship Centres have collectively supported over 12,000 clients, reflecting the sustained need for programs that heal and prevent violence. The next is the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres Kize Anishinaabe program, which is a leading WISE practice which empowers Indigenous men and youth to take part in ending violence by reclaiming their traditional roles and responsibilities as protectors of their communities. The program provides wraparound care for self-identifying Indigenous men and youth who are ready to embark on their healing path or become advocates for their community to end all forms of violence. And finally, the Federation has a program called Indigenous Community Justice Program. It is a culturally appropriate alternative to the mainstream justice system that supports the prevention of violence through diversion programming. The program is based on Indigenous legal principles by involving community members, victims, survivors of intimate partner violence, and elders in the creation of healing plans which seek to resolve and restore balance and mitigate further harm. The program keeps the individual rooted in community, stabilized, connected to long-term healing, and subsequently reduces the risk of recidivism. The Indigenous Community Justice Program was recently designated as the Indigenous-specific Intimate Partner Violence Program by the Province of Ontario. This is a milestone which demonstrates the program's power in addressing offending behavior through culture-based approaches to justice that reduce Indigenous people's involvement in the justice system. Next, I would like to recommend new approaches that can be adopted by the federal government. The first is a new relationship with Indigenous people, communities, and organizations that actually reflect the lived experience in our communities. The lack of federal strategy to support urban Indigenous communities directly impedes improving outcomes across social determinants of safety and health. The second is to establish a national program to ensure victim service workers are integrated within urban Indigenous community service provider networks and employed within organizations like Friendship Centres. The third is for Canada to implement a universal guaranteed basic income program nationally to address deeply entrenched socioeconomic circumstances which remain barriers to safety, health, well-being, and community connection. And finally, increase the capacity for urban Indigenous innovation, program design, and evaluation to support creative approaches to finding new wise practices in ending violence and reducing conflict through culture-based preventative strategies that are informed by those that are most impacted. This concludes our presentation. Thank you, Walalan, for listening, and we would be pleased to answer any questions you may have throughout the session.
Thank you so much. We're now going to pass the floor over to Okay, one moment. Give me this. Patutik. And thank you so much, Jerry. You're going to help me out with this. Jerry Sharp, we're going to pass it over to you for 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, or Madam Ixibauta, and distinguished members of the committee. It's an honor and a pleasure to appear before you today. Since 1984, Paututik Inuit Women of Canada have been the national voice to Inuit women in our country. Through advocacy, policy development, and community projects, Paututik brings awareness to the unique needs of Inuit
Jerry,
women
can you just hold for one? Jerry, can you just hold for 1 moment? We're having a little bit of an issue hearing you. Is there a problem?
Everything is okay. Check with the translation. I'll check with the Google.
Okay. It was just a little quiet in the room, and I just want to make sure everybody can hear you. I know translation said it was okay, but... Okay. So, Jerry, please go right ahead. If you would like to start once again, that would be great. I'll start your 5 minutes over, just so that everybody can ensure that we hear you. So go ahead to Jerry.
Good evening and good afternoon, Madam Chair or Madam Ixibauta, and distinguished members of the committee. It is an honor and a pleasure to appear before you today. Since 1984, Paututik Inuit Women of Canada have been the national voice for Inuit women of our country. Through advocacy, policy development and community projects, Paututik brings awareness to the unique needs of the Inuit women in a wide range of areas, including violence and abuse prevention, justice and policing, health and wellness, and social and economic development. Addressing intimate partner and domestic violence is the main priority for Paututik, and yet the problem has continued to worsen in the past 30 years. I will start by providing you with a glimpse of just how severe the problem is. The rate of violence experienced by Inuit women is 14 times higher than other groups of women in Canada. At times, Inuit children experience abuse and maltreatment 10 times the rate of other Canadian children. In Nunavut, 1 of 2 Inuit women experience severe sexual abuse during childhood. The suicide rate for Inuit is estimated to be between 9 and 20 times the national average. These few facts only reveal the surface of the issue. Reluctance to report domestic violence is further heightened by the Inuit language barrier, a lack of safe places or shelters, and the general mistrust of police. Underlying historical, social, and economic factors contribute to the Inuit experiencing the highest rate of violence in the country. Inuit continue to face intergenerational trauma of residential schools, institutionalized and systematic barriers, systematic racism, overcrowded housing conditions, poverty, and food insecurity. Domestic violence must be addressed as both a physical and mental health issue. We know that psychological traumas, particularly those untreated, have devastating impacts. The financial costs of physical abuse, including emergency services, treatment, rehabilitation, and often medevacs, are significant. Yet current investments to reduce the gendered violence has been insufficient. Many Inuit live in small, fly-in, fly-out communities. Most of Inuit Nunangan communities are experiencing housing shortage and are without a shelter. Too often, there are simply no safe place for women to escape violence, no resources to access. Inuit women are required to navigate a complex system and travel long distances with no transportation or financial means. They are forced to seek shelters outside of their home communities, leaving behind any children and support systems that they have in place. While Inuit women face the highest rates of domestic violence in the country, funding, resources, and a seat at the table for Inuit women's leadership voices as decision makers is significantly lacking. The Inuit-specific gender-based analysis lens must be applied to all policies and initiatives to address domestic and intimate partner violence experienced by Inuit women. The solutions must be led and informed by Inuit women who are the experts and hold the knowledge to solve this issue that directly impacts Inuit women. Paututik has called for investments in shelters and transitional housing and that are coordinated, gendered, and distinction-based. These investments must be sustainable and work to increase access to counseling, treatment programs, and supports for unhealthy forms of addictions which mask and or instigate violence of the underlying traumas. Health, police and service providers must be better educated about Inuit history, culture, gendered violence, and our language. Historically, there's been a breakdown in trust resulting in the fear of those in positions of power. As such as police. Inuit women have expressed feeling re-victimized after seeking help within the justice system and policing system. Outdutik has signed a memorandum of agreement and is working in partnership with the RCMP to shift towards a community-led policing that strives to improve safety and security of Inuit women and for our families and community. The need to support the resources has been heightened during COVID-19 pandemic. Many services were reduced or shifted online. While internet accessibility is a continued problem for Inuit community, mental health and substance misuse issues have arisen even higher. As families remain confined to the home and overcrowded conditions due to health directives, advocacy for shelters and transitional homes for Inuit and their children must be a top priority for Outdutik. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today and to speak to the important issues of intimate partner violence. This issue continues to victimize and traumatize our women and gendered people. Within intergenerational impacts continue to destroy the lives of children, families, and communities and culture. We look forward to working with the federal government to address this modern day tragedy that impacts so many. And we welcome any questions as well.
Thank you very much for those words today. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our first round of questioning. We will be granting 6 minutes to each of our members, and we're going to be starting off today with Layla Goodridge. Layla, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you so much to both of those witnesses for your powerful testimony. One of the things that I have been really trying to bring to the forefront as we've been studying this important topic is pointing to legislative solutions. And so one of the pieces that has been brought to the attention of the committee is Clare's Law, which originated in the United Kingdom and is now in place in both Alberta and Saskatchewan. And so I was just wondering if either of your organizations have heard of Clare's Law, or and what your thoughts would be on that. So perhaps Ms. Sharp first.
Thank you for that question. I can tell you, I personally have not heard of Clare's Law. I can tell you that I have worked advocated for women of the Northwest Territories for many, many, many years. And so I'm unfamiliar with that. That's not to say that our staff are not.
And sorry, yes. Gertie. We can't hear her.
That our staff hasn't. Can you hear me? Okay, so no, we have not. I have not heard of Clare's Law, but I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Sean Longboat, who may be more familiar with the policy work behind some of our program development. Sean.
Yes, thank you, Gertie May. I'm aware of Clare's Law. I haven't studied it in detail. I know some of our staff in our policy shop have information, and happy to follow up in a written format to provide sort of our position on that piece of legislation.
Wonderful. That would be much appreciated. And I think effectively one of the big pieces is, in order to get to the bottom of domestic violence, and one of the things I think is critical is to make sure that we have the right legislative framework in place. So can you point to any pieces in legislation that either currently exists or could be tweaked that would improve the situation, in your opinion? Perhaps Mr. Longboat?
Yeah, so in terms of legislation, we're happy to follow up on specific solutions from a policy standpoint. We presented a number of solutions that address programming because there is important legislative work to advance. There's also a number of program initiatives that are underway that are ready to launch immediately. And so our focus as a Friendship Center movement is really getting down to business in terms of being able to scale up programs that are working because there are not sufficient resources for Indigenous organizations, broadly speaking. And as Gertie May mentioned in her opening remarks, urban Indigenous organizations are often forgotten. And here in Ontario, 85% of Indigenous people live off reserve. And so we're very much interested in talking about the kinds of solutions that can affect positive change in communities immediately.
Wonderful, and thank you. I know as someone that represents the riding of Fort McMurray Cold Lake, and we have a large Indigenous population, and much of that is in urban centres. And the work the Friendship Centre does in my community is truly spectacular. And I can imagine that the work you guys do in Ontario is very similar to what I see in my own backyard. So thank you. I believe Gertie May had something to add.
Yes, thank you. So, Madam Chair, I think from a legislative standpoint, we have a lot of legislation tools. I think we have a lot of legislative tools in place. I think a lot of it has to do with provincial programmatic policies, relationships between jurisdictions that need jurisdictional discord and wrangling that really impacts on our ability to properly get up from under. And also, I feel there's also a need to recognize that legislation is historically and inherently systemically racist against Indigenous women and is only a small part of the solution.
And to Ms. Sharp, you were talking about some of the unique challenges that exist in our far north, and I'm just wondering if you could perhaps expand on some of those issues so that we hear a more fulsome piece for our committee.
Most definitely, and I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity to do this for the pure fact that regardless of any policies that you have in place, any legislation that you have in place, you need to remember where we're located. When we say small fly-in, fly-out communities, that is no joke. That is the reality that we live in. While I am located in Yellowknife in an urban setting, I am not in Inuit Nunangat, you need to remember that in those small communities such as Paulatuk, Sax Harbor, individuals that are encountering intimate partner violence, they need to utilize the healthcare system to get a trip to go out to Inuvik if they're experiencing any form of intimate partner violence. So they're treated like a healthcare visit, which is crap. So when you talk about something that comes from the UK, that is not going to be suitable for the North. The North has only been around for the last 60 years. Yeah. So with Inuit, and when it comes to intimate partner violence, it needs to be community-based and involve everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to now move it over to Sonia Sidhu. Sonia, you've got the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to begin by acknowledging that today is the United Nations World Zero Discrimination Day, as well as the first day of Women's History Month. I think we can all agree that we are all working towards a future when women of all backgrounds are free from discrimination. So thank you very much for that powerful testimony. I would like to ask my first question to OFIFC. Ms. Mills, you were talking about the barriers of safety and culture-based strategy. So we have heard a general increase of domestic violence issues during the pandemic. So, in what way, what we can do? So, where when we are talking about the lack of general trust in policing, so how we can improve that? Language barriers, you already mentioned that. What are the unique barriers? So, of them accessing services, if you can talk about that, like both. I want to ask first Ms. Muse, and then after that, Ms. Sharp, you can add on that too.
Can you get on? Are you able to hear us?
Yes, I'm just expressing that I'm not sure I clearly understand the question that's being asked.
What is a unique?
Sorry, Madam Chair.
So, what is a unique barrier? So, we heard about lack of, the police trust in police services and language barriers. There's a lot of barriers. If you can talk about the barriers and how we can improve those barriers.
Okay, I see. So the level of barriers to support Indigenous women and girls and two-spirit LGBTQIA and men and boys in our community are, it's intersectoral. Every area of work, the determinants of health, like all of those things that impact on people's vulnerability, each of those systems that are trying to respond to help have barriers in them. And one of the ways that we found that works to help improve the jurisdictional wrangling, the intersectoral lack of coordination, all of those things, is to actually have community-based teams that navigate those systems to be able to really encourage coordination, really encourage linkages to culture-based resources like traditional knowledge holders, traditional teachers, just families and kin networks, people who've come through systems and survived. It's really critical to go to community to understand barriers, because the way the community understands barriers is very, very different than what the Western service systems and service structures see as barriers to helping our communities. And that's why it's so critical for any investments to land inside community with organizations that are Indigenous led, Indigenous governed, and Indigenous informed. We are seeing a lot of now awareness around what real barriers are, especially during the pandemic. I think we've seen a new understanding for all the stakeholders in the field, and there could be some education around it. I mean, I think that it's always helpful for us to really understand what keeps systemic racism at play, and how to how to interrupt that, I guess, and how to create new pathways for safety and wellness. We have a lot to say on that, and I think our longer brief really went into some of those barriers. And actually, when I looked at the brief, there are some legislative pieces that we are recommending. And it was a support bill C-223, a national framework for a guaranteed livable income act. That was one of the legislative pieces that we we're currently advancing.
And Ms. Sharp, you want to add on that? How do you think culturally sensitive services are, which is very, very important, how can it be more helpful?
First, there are a number of barriers that do need to be recognized. And with one of the barriers in particular around COVID-19 is having people to isolate in the home. Potentially, this is placing a woman in more danger, where she's being removed from her safety group. I definitely agree that anything that works towards the community is going to help the community. An example that I can give you of something that happened last week in regards to policing. There was the individual stated that there was what there is called a drug dealer living below her. Whether or not that's the case, I don't know. The person living below her decided to call the RCMP. The RCMP responded because her daughter was crying with a social worker wanting to take that individual's daughter, despite the fact that that woman had a recording of that drug dealer verbally threatening to stab her and kill her in her sleep. They did nothing to that individual except remove the woman from her home and brought her over to her sister's home because otherwise they would need to take her daughter. And this was all instigated by the drug dealer.
Wow.
In which nothing happened. She was later returned home to that same place where he started it over again that night. So the RCMP responded to the call from the drug dealer and his concerns, not the uttered threats that were done to the individual woman. They don't live in the same home. He lives below her.
Thank you very much,
So
Jerry.
there's a number of different things.
Thanks very much. Sorry for interrupting you. We were getting a little bit over time, but you have just such important information for us to hear. So sorry about that if you see me start going like this. I'm just going to let everybody know that it was mentioned about having this brief. The brief is being currently translated, so it will be sent to you, the additional brief that was sent. I'm now going to pass it over for 6 minutes to Adrian. Adrian, you have the floor for 6.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses for their very interesting testimonies on the important issue of domestic violence. Thank you very much. I took a lot of notes during your presentations. Firstly, there was the matter of culture that was brought up, and either of you can respond, but when you talk about new approaches and new relationships, I believe in nation-to-nation dialogue. Is that what you meant, that we need to take into account your different cultures in order to examine issues differently when we're talking about domestic violence?
Was that to somebody specific? Okay.
J'avais dit que l'une ou l'autre pouvait répondre.
Either can respond.
Gertie, I see your hands up. Are you having a problem? Or was this?
No, I just
Okay.
wanted to. I just wanted to say that I do think we need to give some time to our Inuit colleague, but I did want to just quickly say that that's not what I was referring to anyway. You know, the vast majority of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people live in urban, rural, and remote areas off reserve and off traditional territory. And though it's very, very important to have those discussions and dialogues with the treaty holders, nation to nation, there's not a lot of political solutions to this complex social problem. And in fact, because of the jurisdictional wrangling and the politicization of Indigenous people in this country, taking a nation-to-nation approach to ending intimate partner violence will never get us there.
Alors, quand vous parlez...
So, when you talk about the importance of investing, whether it be in health, both of you mentioned the matter of public health or housing, and we had an issue about housing in Quebec, and delays make it so that women spend more time in shelters and they need safe housing. So it is important to invest more to prevent those issues and also to investing in housing to allow women to get out of domestic violence situations. I think both of you mentioned that. The question is for both of you because you both talked about the importance of getting out of that cycle of violence and giving confidence back to women, or to allow them to have trust in the system again.
Ms. Sharp, did you want to start on that one?
Yes, please. Thank you. I want to say when it comes to housing, housing is definitely a factor that in Inuit Nunangan, when it comes to those that are underhoused, there is a lot of overcrowding in Inuit Nunangan. I do want to refer back to the community setting. And when I say culture-based for Inuit, and not just Inuit, but here in the north, today, for instance, here in Yellowknife, the Snow King has opened his snow castle. And if you can hear it, that is Dene drummers. This is a free event. And this is a community-based event that's taking place here. The reason why I wanted to show that to you is because anything that involves the community is going to be healthy for the community. And it needs to involve the men, the children, the elders, the whole community as a whole. And it can be something as simple as a drum dance. It can be something as simple as sewing. It doesn't need to be huge, 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 although we need something huge to solve the problem overall. Right now, one of the other barriers that is in place is the fact that we do not have any treatment centers in the north. So when a woman needs to report an instance of intimate partner violence, she needs to consider if she's going to leave the home or have the individual removed from her home. Because if she needs to leave the home, she's going to be leaving her community. So it's not just a case of where do I go for the night? It's more, do I want to leave the community, not just go to Yellowknife or go next door to my sister's house, because it's a community problem. It's not just a house problem. It's a whole community problem. So it takes a community to solve it.
Thank you very much. We're now going to pass on, and there we go. That's letting you know I'm timing my stuff today. We're going to now move over to Leah Gazan. Leah, you have the floor for 6.
Thank you so much, Chair, and really a really deep thank you to both of you on the panel and the critical work you do. Both of you mentioned the need for a guaranteed livable basic income. I'm actually the one that put forward Bill C-223 in response to call to Justice 4.5 to implement a guaranteed livable basic income as a way to help mitigate the violence, the crisis of violence against Indigenous women and girls. Kim Pate actually currently has Bill S-233 that's being debated in the Senate. It's exactly the same bill with exactly the same wording on both sides of the House. We're working jointly on this initiative. Can you very briefly, both of you, explain why, Madame Sharp and Madame May-Muse, why you support the need for a guaranteed livable basic income?
I could start.
Sure.
So, I think the importance of a basic livable income really is about understanding intimate partner violence and domestic violence. How the roots of that violence is well documented by the Truth and Reconciliation, and it has to deal with the colonialism, the layers of intergenerational experiences amongst our people, and it allows women with their families and other gendered people with their families to be able to find a safe haven. And we're now finding that that's a critical piece to stopping further harms. And I'd like to pass it to my colleague Sean for just a minute so he can describe a bit about the housing and how the basic income and the housing is connected. Sean, would you mind to talk a bit about what we're learning with our new initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we know it's well documented that Indigenous people disproportionately experience poverty in communities. And we support basic income, but we also want to ensure that as part of that legislation that services are not impacted. We know that economic self-sufficiency provides a protective factor, creates an alternative to remaining to remaining in an abusive home when you have the economic resources, when you have housing options. It also creates an environment where women have the resources that they need to improve their lives, to access education, to access training, and to become more economically self-sufficient. We are doing a lot of work in this area right now in a program called Urban Indigenous Homeward Bound. That program shows that when you provide Indigenous women with things like housing, with income supports, and with culture and healing supports, that they're far more likely to succeed, and they are succeeding.
Thank you so much. Just because I only have a limited amount of time, and I agree with you. One of the things that is very critical to Bill 223 is the fact that it's in addition to current and future government programs and support, including accessible, affordable housing with rent secured to income. I'd like Madame Sharp, if you could respond very briefly. I have a couple of other critical questions I want to ask both of you, so both of your organizations.
When it comes to women having a guaranteed income, this is something that we definitely would support for the pure fact that it would end reliance on a male companion. It also would help any children that are within the home, because often it is a woman that takes care of the children, not necessarily the only one, but in the case where there is intimate partner violence, it would normally be the woman that takes care of the child, and women will always look after their children first.
Thank you so much. Moving back to the Ontario Friendship Centre, you spoke a little bit about your Indigenous diversion program. Like, we know that men who are violent, it's often rooted in deep trauma. And your diversion program, rooted in community, you've witnessed a very low recidivism rate just by keeping people in the community, nurtured by community. I've been very clear about my position that you can't assist people with violent behaviors by incarcerating them, because it's an antisocial violent environment. Could you tell us a little bit about why you think your Indigenous diversion program is working?
We have 15 seconds.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, Sean could. Okay. Sean definitely can, and we can, and we'll send you more detail. And I think if you look at our brief, you'll find some detail in that also.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
But yes, to your question.
We will get back to you, Leah, for sure. And there we go. So I'm just going to pass it over. We're going to be starting our second round. We'll be starting off with 5 minutes and passing it over to Michelle. Michelle Ferry, you got the floor.
And thank you so much to our witnesses and everybody here. I'm going to start, if it's okay, with Gertie May. Gertie May, you had talked about new relationships, Indigenous-led initiatives, in particular, like lived experience. And I was wondering if you could expand on what you would like to see, more specific examples of what you would like to see. What does that look like?
So we know that when Indigenous communities that have a relationship and a deep knowledge about the needs of that community, when they're provided resources to do a job, they get the job done. These new resources, these new pathways I'm talking about, and these new relationships is basically to sort of eliminate some of the jurisdictional discord and jurisdictional wrangling that happens when we are trying to address very serious harm against Indigenous women. and our communities. And so we're talking about direct funding relationships between the federal government, directly to provincial service organizations that have a mandate to do this work, who are already doing this work and have been doing it for decades. We're talking about getting rid of the white tape and really eliminating a lot of the barriers and to have a lot of flexibility. So we're talking about low barrier, we're talking about high flexibility, we're talking about direct inside community resources, direct to those individuals that need the resources, those communities that need those resources, those families, and so that they can even help find their own solutions. We can support them in finding their own solutions. Those are some of the things, but we have lots of ideas about this because we've been really testing a lot of things. The Homeward Bound program that Sean just talked about, that is a new initiative that's underfunded. Well, actually not even funded, but it's an innovative thing that we're doing with wraparound services. And that's a totally brand new approach that's working. And so we'd love to talk more with you about that.
That's fantastic. Homeward Bound is in my riding of Peterborough-Kawartha. I'm a big ambassador for it, and it is an absolutely outstanding program that should be getting national attention, so I'm really glad to hear you bring it up. If you can send to the committee specifics, like what's actually working, I think that's really valuable when we can get into the nuts and bolts of it. I'd like to turn it over to Jerry. Jerry, a lot of passion you've brought to this committee, and we're really grateful for it. And I definitely think we need to add a hashtag white tape. That was fantastic by Gertie May.
That's not my line, though.
Yeah.
It's Sylvia Miracle's coined
Oh,
phrase.
it's good. It's very good. It's very good. Gertie, or Jerry, sorry, you talk about what I actually believe in, and that's kind of the power of one is the power of many, the very much the community basis of, and you've really touched on how challenging it is because you're not just leaving the partner, you're leaving the community. You have said you need to build trust. There's a lot of distrust with the police. What's the best way to do that?
One thing I was very interested in attempting to do here I wanted to try this in Yellowknife first, was to actually make it mandatory for new officers to participate in some sort of community-driven training. I am an artist. I teach people how to make things like sealskin mitts as well. So one thing that I had been working with the RCMP here in Yellowknife on is setting up sealskin making workshops, that if there was 4 officers, that there'd be 4 community people where the conversations happen naturally. This is something that would be community driven and would benefit only the community. Because this is where the officers would be in a safe place to ask questions such as, why are you raising your eyebrows for yes and squinting your nose for no? They may not feel comfortable in asking that in the community. This would give them a safe place to ask questions like that. There was a lot of interest from the RCMP here in Yellowknife. Unfortunately, COVID has prevented me from starting that. I think that this is something that should go on in every community because it immerses the officers in the community and it builds that trust. When I lived in Inuvik and the officers would participate in Muskrat Jamboree in some of the events, like even just running in one of the events with their full gear on, the whole community clapped and rejoiced in that. To have the officers, in order to protect the community, need to be part of the community. If they're not part of the community, they can't prevent everything from happening.
Awesome.
They really do need to be part.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're now going to move it over for 5 minutes to Anita Vandenbelt. Anita Vandenbelt. Anita, you have the floor for 5.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for very compelling testimony. I'd like to start with the friendship centers, and I'm familiar with the incredibly important work that you do, and also what you mentioned about basing it on the lived experiences, and that being that certainly in Ontario, most Indigenous peoples are living in urban areas. Certainly in my riding, I've got an Indigenous Youth Council, and some of the stories stories are very much along the lines of Inuit or Indigenous young people that are coming to Ottawa, fleeing households where there is violence, coming to the city, and then not being able to find a safe place to live, a place where they will not then face the same kind of violence. I know that advocacy led to, we announced $720 million for Indigenous shelter and transitional housing initiative, one of those which will be right here in Ottawa for Inuit women. How important is that, and how important is it that it be culturally, where people can live within their cultural community, but also have that safe housing, and how much more? I noted that you mentioned that there's a gap in government policy on urban Indigenous, in my view, particularly youth, young women. What more can we do? Should we be expanding that project? How do we resolve this?
Complex question. So lived experience, the reason why focusing on lived experience is so critical is because many Indigenous women and girls and our families in urban settings are basically invisible. And there's a lot of things that are happening in the urban space. I really think there needs to be an urban specific approach to anything we're doing in the country. I'd also like to invite my colleague Sean just to make some comment about just the link to the shelters and that aspect of your question. Sean?
Yeah, so crisis intervention is an important aspect of the work of friendship centers. We do experience high service demands among women who are in crisis, who are fleeing intimate partner violence and other forms of violence. So therefore, shelters and transitional housing is an important immediate intervention. We do have a number of partners across the province that are playing an important role in this space. But with that being said, it is important to highlight that the shelter system itself is not an adequate response to violence, and in many cases can be a hostile environment for Indigenous individuals. A more effective solution, in our view, is developing safe and affordable housing options for Indigenous individuals and families, including women who have been victims of intimate partner violence, to empower them to recover from their experience with violence. And for many years, the UFIFC has been calling on the federal government to invest in a national urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy. We know from our research that safe and affordable housing is a protective factor that counteracts the risk factors of really all forms of violence. So we're happy to provide more detailed information on the specifics of our ask. I think we've provided some general information in our brief, but happy to follow up with details on the nature of that specific approach.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, I still have a minute, so my next question is to Ms. Sharp. I was quite moved by, we talk about rural and then deep rural, and the barriers that you described for some of the women who are in northern communities, fly-in, fly-out communities. I know that the Ottawa Hospital is actually the primary care centre for most of Nunavut, and many of these women do end up here in Ottawa. If you could talk a little bit about what more can be done for those that are, so that they don't have to leave their community in order to get the help and the services. They don't have to use the health system and fly all the way to Ottawa away from their families and supports in order to get help. How can we do that in place?
30 seconds to respond.
The big issue, I think, is going to be midwifery. Reverting back to allowing individuals to give birth in their home communities is going to be a major relief on individuals. Moving to education to online. I also want to touch on the urban center because Paututik definitely is so appreciative of the Ottawa specific shelter that is there. Ottawa does have 5,000 Inuit that live there, and that is more than in some of the northern communities. So allowing them to be culturally relevant is definitely required and needed.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move it to Adrienne. Adrienne, you have 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for their presentations. I would like to come back to something. One of you mentioned intergenerational violence. Could you tell us more about this issue? I can't remember which witness it was who had mentioned that.
I'm going to say that that was myself. And when it comes to instances of intergenerational violence, I am a 53-year-old woman that lives in Yellowknife. I attended residential school, and there are many that are younger than I that have attended residential school. My mother attended the same residential school that I went to. When I was at Acacia Hall, there was a supervisor that was also a supervisor when my mother was at that same school. So the intergenerational traumas that I felt is my mother's anger and not being able to articulate why she was angry. That led to her dying from 3 different cancers because she did not trust white doctors. She did not trust men. In turn, that those very, very vulgar languages were directed towards me and my brother. I tried my damnedest to make sure that that is not directed to my children, and I think that I've succeeded with that. My grandchildren will not know what I grew up hearing, and that's still just 4 generations, and there's 3 to go before that never happens again. So the intergenerational trauma is real.
You have about 25 seconds.
Donc, quand on parle de discrimination,
So when we talk about discrimination in federal institutions like the RCMP, and I was able to sit on the security committee, you say it is important that we be able to trust those institutions and that we break the cycle of violence in those institutions.
Sorry. Okay, I'm not sure if it was. Were you expecting a response from either Jerry or Gert?
mais en fait, je voulais savoir le niveau d'importance.
I wanted to know how important it was in creating trust in institutions like the RCMP where there's a lot of discrimination. So I wanted to know more about the link between those institutions and the intergenerational trauma.
Okay. What I'm going to let you know, Jerry, you've got your mic up on the side. We'll have to bring it down when you speak. But I do know that we're coming right to this last 2.5 minutes. I'm going to have to move it over to Leah. So if there's parts of that, Leah, you have 2.5 minutes, and then we'll do our best to get all the answers.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Madame Sharp, for sharing your story. Federal funding, huge issue. National inquiry came out. We have no timelines, no directed funding specifically for Indigenous women and girls, 2S LGBTQIA folks. Miriam Buehler in the APTN 2 weeks ago said the federal government has fallen flat on their face in response to the national inquiry. One of the things that, I hope I'm correct that Madame Sharp, only 13 of the 51 communities in Inuit Nunavut have emergency shelters for individuals fleeing violence. Can you please share the impact that the inaccessibility to safe shelters has had to protect women and girls 2S LGBTQIA?
When it comes to violence in the smaller communities where there is not a shelter, and I'm going to speak to the Beaufort Delta specifically, which are 9 communities in the upper part of the Northwest Territories. So this includes Tuktoyaktuk, Sax Harbor, Paulatuk, Fort McPherson, Sigachik, Inuvik, Aklavik. In that area, there are 2 shelters. One is an emergency shelter in Tuk. The other is the transitional home in Inuvik. If somebody in Sax Harbor needs to access the transitional home in Inuvik, they actually have to get the approval of the nurse in charge so that they're able to fly to from Sax Harbor to Inuvik to use this shelter. So this isn't if they feel that they need to utilize the shelter. This is how they get approval to use the shelter. It's considered to be part of healthcare, which it is not. And it should be on its own budget line, and it should not be part of health because that is a conflict of interest.
So women fleeing violence can't just walk down the street to their local shelter for safety. And what does that resulted? Yes, and how does that resulted, like in terms of, for example, murdered and missing? How is that increased as a result to that?
In my opinion, when it comes to, and this is something that I gave as testimony to the inquiry as well when they were here in Yellowknife, in my opinion, when it comes to women needing to flee violent relationships, they go to urban centers. When they go to urban centers, this results in women ending up in Edmonton, Vancouver, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Montreal, Nova Scotia. And this is where we lose our aunts, our sisters, our babies, our grandmothers, because they've been completely removed from their support systems, and they fall into this cycle of down spiraling victimization. So it's a huge issue.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of time for our first panel. So on behalf of the Status of Women Committee, I would really like to thank Gertie, May, Sean, and Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us today and providing this passionate testimony. What we're going to be doing is we'll take a break for about 1 minute. We're going to switch over to our second panel. We would ask today, this first panel's witnesses, if you could leave the meeting, just press the leave button on the bottom of your screen. That'd be fantastic. And we'll get started. Jenna, you have a question or?
Thank you, Karen. I do have a question. I do have a motion I wanted to discuss briefly, and I'm not sure when would be the best time during our meeting today.
Perhaps if we could do it, there's a little bit of committee business closer to the end.
Okay.
So perhaps
Perfect.
if we could allow the first group to come through and we'll get it done, and then we'll ensure that we can have that discussion for you, okay?
Amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. this meeting. I'd really like to welcome our next group of panelists today from the Connecticut. Now, I'm going to make mistakes, so I need everybody to fix whatever I say. So I would like to welcome Angela Brass, the coordinator of You Matter program, Wabung Abnujig Eng, Angie Hutchinson, Executive Director, and from the Women of the Métis Nation, Les Femmes Michif Optimisimac, Melanie Omini-Ho, President. Melanie, you're going to have to help me out on this stuff. So I'm going to pass it over to Angela. We will be starting off with 5 minutes each, so I will give you my timer, and 1 minute, I will show you my 1 minute sign to start wrapping it down. So I'm going to pass the floor now to Angela. You have 5 minutes.
Hi there. My program, or the You Matter program, focuses on bringing teen dating violence with adding the Indigenous teachings to it to bring that awareness with them. And so far, it's been going very well, having the elder do the teachings for the youth and the young adults. And it's been very beneficial so far. We've had a lot of the youth disclose to us on some of the things that they've seen and experienced, which is a big step. But I feel that they've built that comfort with having the elder and passing on the Indigenous teachings to the youth. So far, our program has been very beneficial for the Winnipeg and inner city area, and that's really all I had to bring forward today. If there's any questions.
Pardon? Okay. One minute. Yeah, I'm very sorry about that. We just had a switch over and a few different people coming and asking me some questions. So thank you very much. I'm now going to move it over to Wabung Abnujaweg, Angela Hutchinson. Angela, you had the floor for 5 minutes.
Tanse, and good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and the honorable members of Parliament for the opportunity to present to the committee today. I join you today from Winnipeg Treaty 1 territory. These lands have been stewarded by the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, and Oji Cree nations for millennia and is the homeland of the Métis Nation. I also acknowledge Treaty 3 territory and Shoal Lake First Nation, which is the primary water source for Winnipeg. My name is Angie Hutchinson, and I am the Executive Director at Wabung Abanujiak. Wabung Abanujiak is an Indigenous nonprofit organization established to empower children and their families to end the cycle of violence. Wabung Abanujiak provides opportunities for holistic healing and support to children, youth, individuals, and families to thrive through the support of programming and services that are rooted within Indigenous ways of knowing. Our programming is directed by the expressed needs of the community, gathered through community councils and community connection. At its heart, it's a relationship-based connection to community. Wabung Abanujiak holds the vision of a place and time where children and their families can live free from violence and unrestrained by the impacts of violence. To achieve this vision, Wabung Abanujiak creates a community that wraps around children and their families to nurture their healing and well-being so that they can take their rightful places within the world and the future. The Truth and Reconciliation calls for action speak to the restoration, revitalization, and strengthening of Indigenous cultures by and for Indigenous peoples through the provision of culturally relevant services on issues such as family violence and Indigenous-specific victim service programming. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People uphold that Indigenous people have the right to self-determination, including social and cultural development. Indigenous people have the right to revitalize, use, develop, and transmit to future generations their history, languages, oral traditions, and philosophies. The National Inquiry calls for justice, support the revitalization of Indigenous health and wellness care practices through land-based teachings and ceremonies, and supporting Indigenous-led initiatives for individuals and families and communities to access culture and knowledge as a strength-based way to support cultural reclamation and revitalization. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples notes that understanding inequality and power imbalances lie not only in relationships, but also within structural violence. Family violence cannot be addressed as a singular problem, but rather requires addressing the root causes of inequity, including racism and patriarchy as contributing factors to family violence, in addition to addressing the dynamics and behaviors of violence within relationships. The insidious impacts of the settler colonial process across Turtle Island have had devastating impacts on Indigenous families, communities, and nations. The intentional and systematic destruction of Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination was undertaken through the destruction of families and communities, through the removal of children through the residential schools, the 60 Scoop era, and the ongoing devastation of the child welfare system. These historical and ongoing systems of oppression are intended to strip away a sense of belonging and strength, disrupting families and communities, and they continue to have negative and damaging impacts on the well-being of Indigenous communities. Wabung Abanujiak creates a community of support for individuals, families, and communities healing from violence for current and future generations. Indigenous ways of healing are holistic and inclusive. Wabung Abanujiak honors that participants are the experts in their own experiences, and understanding one's healing journey is not a time-bound nor a linear process, but rather would be reflective, flexible, and responsive to experiences. Healing requires humility, patience, and wisdom. An aspect common to many Indigenous nations is the connection to relationship building, community, and kinship ties. It is with this understanding that healing for children cannot take place without healing of families and communities. Programming needs to move beyond narrowly defined criteria and have the ability and flexibility to be responsive and rooted within relationship-based approaches. We must see the child at the center of families and communities, and healing opportunities for children is intimately connected to healing for all of those around them. Can I ask him now? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we're now going to move it over to the Women of the Métis Nation and Melanie. Melanie, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Omenhio, and I'm the president of La Femme Michif Otipemisiwak. I'd like to bring greetings on behalf of my board of directors and staff. I actually am located right now in the land of Treaty 6 and the Métis motherland, and am found in Edmonton at this time. We implement our vision and mandate through national advocacy for distinctions-based, culturally relevant policies that are intended to improve the lives and well-being of Métis women, children, families, and communities. We apply a gender intersectional approach to the views and equitable access and equality of outcomes through a Métis gendered lens, considering our historical and contemporary Métis women's roles and acknowledging that gender and culture are inseparable. It is also through this approach that we have developed our gender-based analysis that we work with. Preventing violence and abuse against Métis women, children, and two-spirited and gender diverse people has been a priority for La Femme Michif Otipemisiwak since its very inception. In addition to consistently engaging in activities to promote Métis women's leadership, LFMO undertakes many activities to end gender-based violence and interpartner violence. From our perspective, gender-based violence is not a women's issue, but rather an issue that requires a whole lot of society response to end this grim reality. Over the last few years, much of our work has been dedicated to the work of developing a report we call Weaving Miskatoha. It is the Métis Nation's journey to ending violence of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. We are currently undertaking the development of a Métis Nation action plan to implement our plan. In addition to our ongoing work on missing and murdered women and girls and 2S LGBT people, LFMO has undertaken the development of a gender-based violence toolkit. Our toolkit is strength-based and incorporates principles of lateral kindness. When we use these lenses, we hold in balance the acknowledgement of our challenges while celebrating our resilience and strength, those positive characteristics that have helped us to overcome for generations and keep going and thriving through our adversity. This is relentless work, but our mission will always remain to see a world where Métis women from across the Métis Nation motherland are safe, respected, connected, and empowered, and have the capacity to work with Canadian Métis governments, agencies, and organizations to help create the conditions for healthy, vibrant, and productive communities. The lack of understanding of Métis identity and the misrepresentation of Indigenous women have been reflected in their stereotypical media portrayals, which has led to their continued dehumanization and mistreatment in Canadian society. Gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence against Métis women, does not exist in a vacuum. It is a reaction that is a result of colonization, toxic masculinity, and imposing patriarchal values and norms. Popular culture, including television shows, movies, video games, have situated Métis women and girls as uncivilized, hypersexualized, and disposable. When accessing services, Métis women, girls, and gender diverse people have continually faced racism that is distinct from the racism experienced by First Nations and Inuit women, girls, and gender diverse people. The racism is often due to a lack of information about Métis women's experiences. One way that LFMO promotes ending violence with respect is through our She is Indigenous campaign. And we are going to continue to work with our grandmothers and elders to help make sure that there's kinship and community programs and cornerstones to healing. And we are going to develop with an emphasis on education and awareness to help change this. We need to involve men and boys in these conversations, and we will continue to do this in a culturally relevant manner. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate that as well. As we're going to go around, we'll start off our first round of questions. The first round is for 6 minutes, and we'll pass it over to Dominique, who is online. Dominique, you have the floor for 6.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la...
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Hello, colleagues, and thank you to the witnesses for your presentations. Ms. Brass, you weren't able to finish, but I'm very interested in the program that you implemented, the You Matter program. And I find it interesting that you worked with different generations. The younger generation gets the knowledge from the older generation. How does it work? How is it organized? Who participates? Is it on a volunteer basis? I have so many questions, and I'll give you the time to explain in detail what happens, because it's important and it's interesting. All of the initiatives that we get to hear for our study could be used elsewhere. So thank you so much for whetting our appetite, but I'm eager to hear more details on your experience.
Hi there. Well, thank you for being so intrigued. And I apologize for earlier for the lack of, more information. So my program is the Ganniganichuk Incorporation, and we're in central Winnipeg. So we have various programs that we run out of our organization that deal with the youth, right? And we also deal with young adults. So the youngest youth that we've presented to has been 9 years old. And the oldest youth we've presented to has been up to, I believe, the age of 26, right? And these are after school programs that Ganaginichak provides for the inner city Indigenous people in the core of the city, where it's a little bit more low income individuals. And so we use the programs that are run out of Ganaginichak to present to them, the You Matter program. And the program's been around for 2 years, but unfortunately, because of the COVID, we had to stop presenting the program. And now that we finally have been able to present, it's been every evening, almost every evening, from Monday to Friday. And I have an elder that comes in with me, and we kind of tag team or take turns, where she will provide an Indigenous teaching to our youth, who are urban youth, right? Because they haven't had the opportunity to learn these traditions here in the city. And so we get to provide that knowledge that we've been lacking as youth living in the city. And they soak it in, they love it. Right. And what she talks about with her Indigenous teachings, I incorporate the statistics and some of the things that we see that are very violent, like in our music, in our social media, right, in our movies, in our video games, things like that, and be able to relate with the youth so that they have an understanding of how much teen dating violence that there is. And unfortunately, there is quite a bit with Indigenous people, because we have those traumas that have been passed down from generation to generation. And it's educating our youth with these types of programs that have been very beneficial so far.
Are these teachings linked to your Indigenous resources, to what you've been through? Is it linked to you directly?
Not me.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Not me directly. However, have I used some of my past traumas for examples with the youth? Yes, of course I have. Has our elder that I work with as well used her past traumas? Yes, she has. And this is how our inner city youth, our urban youth that are Indigenous, are able to relate to us. They're able to relate to their own families with their some of their horrific passed down traumas that they've had to deal with as well.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bress. Ms. Hutchinson? I think I need to put on my glasses. I have 1 minute left? Okay. Ms. Hutchinson, if I understood correctly, you have a similar type of intervention. You talked about programs and services that have to do with the Indigenous way of living. Is that truly part of your interventions?
Yeah, all of our programming at Wabang Abanusiak is rooted within Indigenous ways of knowing. So that is a big part of how we are uplifting Indigenous knowledges. Unfortunately, a lot of the times we face challenges in wanting to deliver Indigenous-based programming that's rooted within our worldviews, our understandings, our connections to relationships, and how that fits within funding criteria or reporting measurements, because they're two different worldviews. One is often very qualitative and lacks the understanding of intimate relationships. So that's relationships with self, with families, with communities. We see individuals who come to Wabang Abanusiak as a whole being, and they exist not just specific to, a specific criteria tied to one program. So whether it be they're linked specifically to a program that supports individuals who have young children.
Excusez-moi, we are past the 6 minutes by quite a few seconds here. So we are going to pass it over now to Jenna Suds. Jenna, you've got your 6 minutes, and perhaps that can be discussed in the next round as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today. It's certainly an important topic, and we appreciate your contributions today. I'm going to start with Ms. Hutchinson. I was intrigued, in our previous witnesses on our other panel today spoke as well about this focus on community. And you also mentioned your approach, which involves, the wraparound around the child, around the family, and trying to approach it from that perspective. So I'd love to hear a bit more about why the focus and the outcomes of that approach wrapping around the family.
Thank you. I will make a note. I am getting
connectivity problems.
That's why. Yeah. So if you're able to hear me, that wraparound approach, if I understood the question, because it cut out a little bit, absolutely is essential. Healing is not done on an individual basis, nor is it done on a specific trauma basis like family violence or intimate partner violence. As been mentioned throughout a number of folks who spoke today, there's a larger kind of context of the historical factors that have contributed to the levels of violence that we now see facing within Indigenous communities. And so that individual is seen within a larger family unit structure and a larger community unit structure. And when one individual starts to undertake that healing process, there is ripple effects through the community, through their families. And it goes both ways. It's that reciprocal understanding of that intimate connection of community and relationship and kinship ties. That is specific. It's rooted within who we are as Indigenous people and the way that we move through the world. So that just the very fact of having wraparound supports and seeing an individual as part of a larger unit within families, within communities, that is uplifting Indigenous ways of knowing and being. It's the way that we move through the world, and that's how we approach all of our aspects of healing as well.
Thank you very much for that. And actually, maybe one more question for you again, Angie. And in my preparations for today and reading a bit about the amazing work that you do, it's my understanding that you do offer transitional housing for up to 1 year. And I'd like to ask, how that program is going. What is the availability? What is the demand like?
Yeah, absolutely. So our transitional housing is available. We say up to 1 year, but we also, again, it's rooted within that individual's experience. So we're responsive to the understanding that we're not setting a specific timeline, 1 year, 365 days, folks are out the door. We understand that housing supply is a huge challenge. Access to safe and stable housing, there may be housing that's available, but it's not a safe place for that individual to go. So we have to work and walk alongside that individual to find safe and stable housing. Safe and stable housing that's affordable. Affordable housing is a huge barrier to be able to access, having that permanent place to call your home. And we definitely see a huge challenge in family units. Larger family units require larger housing, apartments or housing units. That's a huge, huge gap within what's available within housing supply right now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And a question for Melanie. You had stated that gender-based violence is not a women's issue, and also later commented on the importance of involving men and boys. I'd love for you to expand upon that, particularly how you're engaging men and boys as part of the solution.
So part of our role, of course, our mandate is to work with Me Too women and the gender diverse people. So we do try really hard to work with them, but we work with the other Métis Nation organizations and governments to start bringing in opportunities to have a change of attitude. None of us, and much like the previous person said, none of us live in isolation of each other. And the only way that we're ever going to change how things work is to change the dynamic of how people see each other. Gender-based violence was not a normal part of what our society was. in the early stages of our communities. So one of the things that we are doing is working on things like developing programs and in encouraging our various Métis Nation regional organizations to start looking at things like being more than a bystander and helping to understand how to change the attitude of people. And we also have a She is Indigenous program that's to help demonstrate and lift up women and the important role that Indigenous women play in our communities, so that men do not see us as a disposable part of society and that we're not an objectifiable part of what our community is. And those are things that we've tried to develop to try to change how men, because it isn't just Indigenous men that need to have re-education on who women are, it's all men.
Absolutely.
So,
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're now going to turn it over to Andrian. You have 6 minutes, Andrian.
Merci beaucoup aux trois témoins de ce.
Thank you very much to the three witnesses in our second panel, Ms. Brass, Ms. Hutchinson, Ms. Omigno. Thank you so much. I have a question for each of you. For Ms. Hutchinson, in your presentation, you talked about the Truth and Reconciliation Report. I was wondering if you could tell us, you had a few suggestions, but what needs to be implemented to work on the matter of domestic violence and intimate partner violence?
Thank you. Programming that is Indigenous-led, developed, and that is available through the community at the direction of the community. As been mentioned a number of times, individuals are the experts of their own lives. And when we work with community to understand the expressed needs of community, community-based organizations such as Wabang Abinusiak are then able to respond and provide opportunity. We see often a mistrust of systems. So family violence, Indigenous victim services that are rooted within systems like the justice system or policing systems, they are not being trusted, and folks are not going to reach out to those systems. They are going to come to folks that they have relationships with, and that's community-based organizations who build relationships on a day-by-day basis and inherently really work with individuals and walk alongside them, and not direct individuals into how they should be healing or the steps they need to take to heal.
Donc, si je comprends bien l'importance.
So if I understood correctly, it's important to give the victims confidence so that they can report things. Ms. Omigno, you talked about the Commission of Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. It was very important. Could you talk to us about recommendations from that report that could be important, specifically funding the implementation of resources that are culturally adapted to women and girls who are Indigenous in urban communities and on reserves? Do you believe that the federal government responded positively to that recommendation? And if yes or no, what should be done to improve on that?
So we've been a very active part of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls process in the building of the National Action Plan. I do know that there was a very hefty response that was given to try to address issues for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. But I want to tell you that at this time, there has not been enough action to implement the recommendations that were brought forward. There are many amazing recommendations that are anything from trying to help for the healing of the families who've been impacted by the legacy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. There are recommendations around the prevention of so that we can stop seeing this as a norm. And then there is a lot of work that needs to be done within the justice system to try to help our people, both as victims and as people that are a part of that criminal justice system, to help them so that they're not put in places of being vulnerable. And all of that work needs to happen now. And our sadness is that there's very little actually actions happening at this time. There was a lot of energy put around this, but there has not been any follow through, is what I would tell you.
Oui, on a l'impression parfois que ce rapport.
Sometimes we might feel that we could work with that report again. And Ms. Brass, you talked about knowledge sharing, and you talked about elders and teenagers, and this approach is intergenerational and sharing different experiences with violence and to help people learn and to break the cycle. That's what you're doing with your organization, and that is a recommendation that you have, correct?
If we could have this program run all across Canada in every major city, I totally recommend it. And even in the smaller communities, it helps, right? It's having that shared knowledge and passed down knowledge that hopefully will help change the way things have been from the historical harms we've had to encounter with First Nations people.
Donc, si je retiens bien vraiment.
So, an approach based on sharing, linked to the different experiences depending on the community, and an experience where teenagers could learn from their elders. I think I understood correctly, and perhaps I will come back later because I only have 5 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to pass it over to Leah. Leah, you have the floor for 6.
Thank you so much, and good to see Winnipeggers here, and nice to see you again, Madame Aminio. Yes, good to see you again. Have a very short, brief 5 minutes, so I'm going to do like a fast round because I want to hear from all of you because I know that you're amazing. So I'll start with Madame Brass. One of the things we know about youth is when particularly Indigenous youth have a sense of identity, know who they are, it becomes a shield in the world. I know Ganaganegic provides excellent programs for young people to really understand who they are and where they come from. How do you think that assists with mitigating the crisis of violence?
I think it will help a lot because we have those historical harms or those blood traumas that they refer to from our past generations that we feel as Indigenous people, and having the youth learn these traditions that we lack here living in the cities makes a huge difference. And I've seen it, and the confidence that they have is amazing. And to be part of that and to share that knowledge with them is the most rewarding thing I've encountered so far.
Thank you so much, Madame Hutchinson, super rock star. And I know that you've done so much work, especially around the National Inquiry as well. I know that we haven't touched on this before. You spoke about how Wabang provides land-based programming. Why is land-based programming critical in terms of assisting families with healing?
Absolutely. Land-based programming is an essential part of culturally based programming. So culture is tied to the land, language is tied to the land, who we are as individuals is tied to the land. So that opportunity in particular for urban folks to be able to access land-based teachings where they haven't had the opportunity or they lack the economic ability to access land-based teachings is critical. That is really at the root of who we are as Indigenous people. And again, that connection to our understanding of who we are, who we breathe, how we live. When we introduce ourselves as Indigenous individuals, we will often tie ourselves to the land that we come from, because that's what lives in our bones and that's what lives in our blood, and that's who we are as individuals. And so that access to back to the land is restoring that sense of belonging, identity, and knowing who you are as an individual.
Thank you so much for that. And Madame Aminio, you spoke about how you take strength-based approaches. And, you know, you talk about lateral kindness. That really hit me, because I know that when people often talk about Indigenous people, they speak of us as a deficit, from deficit perspectives, yet we are so resilient and we are still here, and we're supposed to be eradicated, but we are still here. That speaks to our strength. So I want you to speak a little bit about that.
So one of the things that's always struck me, and one of the things that have made us as successful as we have, are the Indigenous, amazing, powerful women that are around us. And I had the great fortune of being raised by many of my grandmothers and my aunties, and they always taught us that we lift people up. We don't try to find ways to tear them down. And so we've worked really hard to try to implement that in the work that we do and in the walk that we walk. And that's what's so amazing about our She is Indigenous campaign. We are a resilient lot of people, and we continue to tell people we're not the social detriment of society. We are your doctors, we are your lawyers, we are your teachers, we are your grocery store clerks. We are the people that are walking right beside you and helping to lift up and support our country. And we needed to be treated with those values and those respects. And so that's why we do strength-based work, and we do a lot to try to lift up and hold up women all over the place. The number of Indigenous professors that there are that are working throughout our universities in this country, they need to be recognized and acknowledged for all the things that they bring. We are not a deficit, and we are not to be seen as anything lesser than anybody else. And I really appreciate the question, and it's really good to see you again too.
Yes, for sure. Very quickly, Madame Brass or Hutchinson, you talked about kinship ties. Can you expand on that? We don't have a lot of time. I think kinship ties, what does that look like?
Yeah, I can speak to that very quickly. So when we talk about that disruption of community, the disruption of sense of place, that is that sense of kinship. So who we are, where we come from, leads us to know where we are going. So that kinship tie is really understanding self, it's understanding family, it's understanding community, and it's understanding nations.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What we're going to do is we're about to start our second round, but we have not a lot of time. So we're going to go three, Liberals, Conservatives, 3 and 3, and then it's going to be 90 seconds for the NDPM block that you will be provided. So we're going to start off with Michelle. You've got 3 minutes, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of the witnesses. It's nice to hear all of the work that's being done. I loved to hear from Melanie about how you're involving men. I think that's critical. And from Angie about children being a key component. I'd like to go to Angela Brass, and I love your enthusiasm and optimism and passion for what you've been able to accomplish. And I think when we talk about systemic trauma and those multi-generations and how long it takes to see real change, I'm curious, seeing that you've worked with kids from age 9 up to 27, do you have any success stories of kids who've broke generational trauma that you can speak on?
Well, I think right now what I could just really speak on is something that's very fresh and very current that's happened last week with some of the young adults who were 17 and 18 is that they came back in the next week, because it's a 12-week kind of course that we run with them. And they came back and they actually said that they started talking to their partner, apologizing for the way that they've treated them and trying to discuss ways which they learned from the You Matter program on how to better their relationship. And that was the biggest reward I think I could have right now, or that we could have as a program.
That's fantastic. You don't know what you don't know, right? So to change that trajectory is absolutely phenomenal. I'd like to talk a little bit more, Angela, about what you're doing in terms of social media. I'm very interested in this because I think it's one of the biggest challenges. And we heard from Melanie about this too. And if Melanie wants to touch on this, about a lot of the media that is consumed by youth and adults that portrays toxic images or thoughts. How are you using social media in a positive way to connect and educate teens and youth about healthy relationships?
I think right now is the kids are so tech savvy. They teach us all the positive ways, right? And they also know the negative ways of social media. So from the earliest age of 9 up to, like I said earlier, to the later stages in their early 20s, works. And what have we done is just we've used this as examples so far as ways of negative, that we see a lot of negative that has become desensitized to us, right? And that we have to start, go forward in a positive.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much.
Just in case you wondered, it's your time's up. Thanks very much. There was a little bit, I'm sorry, there was those last few words we did miss, Miss Brass. Can you just say that last sentence around? I'm sure you don't have it directly in your head, but no, you're thinking, I'm not sure what that last sentence was, but we were talking about the negative on social media, and that was the part. Did you get what you needed?
I think so.
Okay.
I didn't hear exactly, but I think
Fantastic. Okay.
I think I got it.
Okay. We're going to move it over. Emanuela, you got 3.
So thank you very much to all of our witnesses for being here with us today. And my question is going to go to Ms. Brass. I only have 3 minutes, so I'm probably limited in how many I can ask. But basically, I'm interested in the You Matter program. I know that you guys go into schools and do after-school programs. And you said that you're in Winnipeg, I believe. So that, I guess there are many Indigenous students attending the same schools, and so you can offer those types of programs. What about for kids that are in different cities and that are more spread out and attending regular schools? What would you recommend for kids like that, and who could benefit from these types of programs? And how can the government kind of help support that?
Well, one of the key things about the You Matter program is that when we go to do these presentations, is that we're not only presenting to the youth, but the adults in charge of these different programs or these different classes are to observe what they're doing so that in the future they can continue bringing the teen dating violence awareness to them. Will we have an opportunity to reach out to rural communities? Yes, I am hoping to do so. And now with some of these restrictions being lifted with the COVID, I'm really hoping to get out there and bring more awareness to everybody.
Okay. And another question, I guess, that I have is, obviously this program is very necessary in these communities specifically. What are some of the things you can tell us about teen dating in Indigenous communities that are some of the biggest problems that we should tackle and that we should be looking at when we're doing this report and these recommendations?
I think for them just to be able to recognize that it's wrong, that stuff that we may have seen intergenerational, and that some of us may have been told just to brush under the rug, and that we have to use our voice and we have to put a stop to it because it is wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Would any of the other witnesses like to chime in, or with regards to teens specifically? I know that you don't necessarily work with youth, but if you've done work with youth, if you have any additional comments to make.
The only thing I would like to tell you is that generally youth, this is the generation of communication, and we need to really make sure that our young people are educated on being critical thinkers. Because as we can see, social media has its place and there's many benefits to it, but we always often see what the negative is. And so we need to make sure that our youth are protected and safe. And I really do hope that the federal government starts looking at the development of legislation to protect young people from being vulnerable within the process of internet and social media.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm cutting you off now. Thank you so much. We're going to now move it over to 90 seconds to Adrienne. You have the floor.
I only have 3 times 30 seconds, so if you could answer in 30 seconds. In order to find concrete solutions for intimate partner violence, what would be needed to prioritize? Increased funding, better culturally adapted resources, or 3, more legislation to better work against coercive control?
I would say prioritize all of them. We need stable, secure funding that's flexible, that allows us to be responsive to culturally based programming that's relevant to whatever distinct region or community that it lies within. And there has to be a prioritization for legislative changes that really address those larger systemic factors to violence as well. So prioritize all of them.
I would also agree. I think all 3 of them need to be changed. I don't think that we can work on just one element and forget all the others. I think that we need more funding, we need more resources, we need more shelters or second stage transitional homes. There needs to be a lot more emphasis on even the laws that relate to partner violence or domestic violence in our communities. There's very often very little attention that actually protects the victims of domestic violence.
Thank you so much. We're going to just pass it on now to Leah. Leah, you have the last 90 seconds. Leah, I'm calling you.
Thank you so much. My question is for Madame Hutchinson. You have an addiction relapse program that uses a medicine wheel model as a framework for healing. Can you explain what that model is and talk about why those kind of incorporating appropriate culturally appropriate supports is so critical in healing people that are struggling with addictions often rooted in trauma?
Absolutely. The connection between traumatic experiences and substance use absolutely is a big part. And it's understanding, again, a holistic understanding of an individual. Very often, a lot of the addictions treatments that are kind of more Western or mainstream really try to piecemeal or separate that individual into treating like a specific, physiological response to an addiction, but it fails to recognize the historical trauma, or they have to address mental health concerns before they can address their addictions. And so the programming that we offer, again, is rooted within Indigenous ways of knowing and really understanding that an individual exists as a whole person. And again, that's being able to address the mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical wellness of that individual to assist in their healing journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Today has been just fantastic with the panelists. I'd really like to thank Angela, Angie, and Melanie for being here. I went out the easy way. I didn't say everybody's last names. I'll figure this out one day. I'm sorry. But I'd really like to thank you for being part of this great discussion as we're doing this study. So thank you very much. I'm just going to ask if you could all just press on to the leave. We just have a couple little things left to do, but if you could leave the meeting for our panelists, it's just that the leave button down there, and then we just have a little bit of committee and administration work to go through. Thanks so much. And okay. Fantastic. So it looks like we've got everybody. So everybody, thank you so much. Jenna, I'm going to pass it to you. Did you still want to put forward your motion? I know that we've had a little bit of discussions in here today too. Jenna, did you want to put your motion forward?
So yes, I apologize. I wasn't able to be in person. I'm not sure if it's necessary. It was really just around the timing of the minister coming. I'm not sure if you've discussed that in the room already.
An official motion then, Jenna. We'll just kind of have an overview of what's looking at. In the last 24 hours, everybody should have received this document. It's basically a document put together by our wonderful analysts from the Library of Parliament. It's indicating who has been put on, who have we seen. And then in the last table, there's tables here. It's indicating what are some of the possible gaps. Who have we not heard from? And so Claire and Dominique have put some information here too. In table 2, it will show anybody that's remaining on your list that has not come, and then it also indicates who has been invited and who has said no, they're not able to come. So what we'd really like to do is, we know that there are some gaps here. I mean, today we've had some great discussions, but we're probably, as we're discussing these things, I'm sure there's some gaps. And today I heard questions on teen dating and things like that are exactly to do with our motion. So I'm going to actually read the document that our clerk has put forward to me. So halfway through the study is where we're at right now, and so these gaps are there. I'm going to ask if every team can kind of look at these lists and refocus on making sure that we're filling in these gaps, and make sure that we have a list back to the analyst for March the 3rd at 4 p.m. for any witnesses that you think that we would like to see. I recognize that we're coming closer to the end, so if anyone wants to reach out and just have some informal conversations, we can do that as well. One of the biggest matters, and Jenna, I'll talk about that right now. One of the biggest matters is, when are we going to see the minister? So over this time, the minister it's kind of confirmed. I think it's kind of confirmed. We're going to be speaking to the minister on the 1st of April. So that's going to be closing up near the end of our study. And the clerk has been working to make sure that we can fill in all of those times. One of the things is there's a couple different things that are coming up. We have the supplementary estimates that are actually due March 31st? March 23rd. Well, I'm making up dates. March 23rd. And we also have the main estimates that have just come out as well. What I would suggest, and I would hope we could all be good on this, but the supplementary estimates had been referred to the committee. With the agreement of the committee, I would suggest that we forego the study of the supplementary estimates and just look at the main estimates that are also coming, because they're basically all coming to us at the same time, and using our time wisely. During that time, that's when we call in the officials from Wage, and it gives us an opportunity to also speak to the minister on that. Is there any discussion or concerns with us kind of forfeiting that and then being able to just look at the mains? Is everybody okay with that? If we, Anita, do you have something?
Just a clarification.
Yeah, sure.
So if we're inviting the minister for the 1st, assuming that she's available, that would be part of this study, I thought, because that was part of the original motion.
That is correct.
Okay.
It'd be part of this. Okay. But what we can do is, because usually what we'd have is the minister for 1 hour, and then Wage would be here for the 2nd hour. But we've already had Wage here. So instead of, we've had Wage here, right? I'm pretty sure we did. So instead of having that 2 hours just specifically on the study, what we could do is separate it so we have the minister for that 1 hour and have the support from her staff there. And then we can switch into the main estimates for the second half of that, if that's okay. And then we're not calling the same people back within days, and we have the minister here at that time as well. Any discussion from that? Are we okay on that? Go for it, Anita.
Yeah, I think the mains aren't until May, so I believe.
When are they due?
So I mean, I think we could have her come for the study, and then we can look at having another opportunity to have her before the end of May for the mains.
Okay.
Just think it'll be a little bit confusing to have
not a
both
problem.
in the same day.
That's absolutely fine. So would we be looking at having another panel then for that day? Yeah. So then what we'll do is we'll try to fit in another panel then for that day. We'd have the minister for the 1 hour then instead, and put in a panel for 3. And with everybody, if that's okay, I just want to see, do we get support from everybody on allowing the supplementary estimates to go through? Is that okay if it's reported back to the House? We're all good with it? Everybody okay on that? I would say, any questions? Everybody's good? So then what we'll do is we'll go back to the main estimates. We'll find a time that we can look at that, because I know that we'll be starting our second study. We'll be doing draft. We'll be doing all of these things, so we'll get that done. So yeah, what we'll be looking at is that day. Is there any other questions or any other concerns? Leah, your hand was up and then it was down. Leah, go ahead.
Just very quickly, I know that there's been a lot of interest around, rehabilitation for men. And I have somebody who's like a real champion, Mitch Bourbonier, had brought his name up. Is there room? Are you saying that we can offer up names?
If we can have those names in by Thursday night, and also just send me a quick note on that as well, because I know that right now we do need to speak about those things, and that's something that's part of our study is what can we look at. So please send those names forward, and we can look at that again.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Go ahead, Michelle.
So just to clarify, if we want to put forth more witnesses of gaps that we want to fill, do we need to talk about it in committee here, or?
Just talk about it amongst your own caucuses within your own parties and submit those, because we all are affiliated. We all get so many witnesses for this study. And so the clerk has worked to see who can fit in there. Awesome. But I think we can focus on what haven't we heard, right? So I'm going to pass it over to our clerk, because she send them. I said send them to the analysts. Actually, please send them to Alexi. They're supposed to go to Alexi. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Adrian, or no? Everybody's good. Okay. Seeing no other further business. Good. To Emmanuel, you would like to. Emmanuel. No, I said you would like better coffee. They want better coffee. Oh, Emmanuel wants better coffee. I'm sorry. So does Layla. Did I miss somebody's hand there? Leah, were you going to say something, or I got this out now, guys. Be careful. Okay. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for a great meeting. We will see everybody on Friday. We've got lots of great panelists. I'm going to read them out just because. Muslim Resource Centre for Social Support Integration, Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, Ending Violence Association for Canada, Canadian Associations of Chiefs of Police, Changing Ways, and the Boys and Girls Club of Peel. We'll be seeing all on Friday, and I'll see you then. Meeting adjourned. There you go. Better be careful. Bye.